Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Michigan Nature Association's Michigan Nature at Home virtual speaker series. My name is Lauren Ross. I'm the Communications and Events Coordinator for the Michigan Nature Association, and I am joined tonight by two of my colleagues. Julie Stoneman is our Director of Outreach and Education. She will be helping as we go through the presentation with questions that come in. And we are also joined by our Regional Stewardship Organizer, Zach Pacana, who's actually going to be leading us through this virtual sanctuary tour of the Dauner Martin Nature Sanctuary. And I'm going to go through just a few items that I'm sure many of you have heard before, but just in case we have some people who are new to Zoom, I want to make sure you all know that this meeting is being recorded. We do have closed captioning turned on. So if you would like to use that function, feel free to turn that on in your toolbar, which if you're on a computer is at the lower portion of your screen. And if you are on a tablet or a phone, is likely at the top of your screen. We are going to be doing two things tonight using the chat box and the Q&A. There's going to be a couple of interactive portions of the presentation, so feel free to use the chat box for that. For any questions that you'd like our presenter, Zach Pacana, to answer, please use the Q&A, and we will get through those at the end of the presentation, just so there's a good flow for the presentation and there's a good chance that he might answer those questions as he goes. So with that, I will say, I will introduce our speaker tonight. As I said, is Regional Stewardship Organizer Zach Pacana. Zach, do you want to share your screen and get started?
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for joining me. I'm going to awkwardly stumble around and get this loaded up. I'm gonna stop sharing your screen and share over that. All right, there we go. I swear I've done this before. Y'all seeing that okay? Looks good, okay. Alrighty, so just so you know, I am working off of two screens. So I'm going to be looking over to my right, but I swear I am giving you my full attention. So as Rachel mentioned, my name is Zach Pacana. I manage nature sanctuaries across the Eastern Lower Peninsula for the Michigan Nature Association. My coverage area ranges from Presque Isle County all the way down to Monroe County. And I work with a wide variety of habitat types, but today I will focus on what I often refer to as my own backyard community-based nature sanctuary, Dauner Martin, and the wetland communities that it houses. So there's a lot of information that I will cover, and I'm a bit enthusiastic and rambly. So I will do my best to cover all the information that I have loaded onto each screen, and then maybe take a moment to tell a field-related story. And we'll even play a game about halfway through. And like any good game, there might be a prize involved. There we go. Alrighty, so a brief agenda of today's discussion is as follows. I will first introduce my organization, the Michigan Nature Association. I will then give a brief history lesson on this sanctuary's role in the Fenton community. I mentioned community-based nature sanctuary, and we will discuss how community helps play a role in managing this area. We will then check out some of the native flora and fauna, as well as some of the invasive species that seek to destroy this little ecosystem. We will then jump over to a less understood, but still hugely beneficial wetland habitat called Vernal Pools, and discuss ways in which you can directly help with future conservation here in Michigan. And like any good presenter, I will end with a really neat video and time for some open conversation. So now just a little bit about the Michigan Nature Association, or M&A for short. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization headquartered in Okemos. We were founded in 1952 with a mission to acquire, protect, and maintain natural areas that contain examples of Michigan's endangered and threatened flora, fauna, and their habitats. And it is also to promote a program of natural history and conservation education. That jumped around a little quick on me. There we go. Alrighty, so to achieve our mission, we monitor, restore, and maintain over 180 nature sanctuaries, making us the largest statewide network managed by a nonprofit conservation organization in Michigan. Each nature sanctuary is represented by a green dot on the map, so you can see the widespread distribution across the state. And if you look down in that Fenton area on the map, you'll see a cluster of dots in that Livingston, Genesee, and Oakland County pocket. And that is because there is a great amount of diversity and healthy space worth protecting in this area, including Dauner Martin Nature Sanctuary. So we have quite a few sanctuaries spread out around the state. And if you have a favorite, why don't you just take a moment to type it in the chat box? And if you don't have a favorite M&A sanctuary quite yet, feel free to include your favorite non-M&A natural area. If I had to pick, I would say my favorite M&A sanctuary is tied between a little place up in Northeast Michigan called Spittler Shore for its cool coastal fen and up north vibe. And that's the one that's shown in the background of this screen. And it's tied with, of course, the lovely Dauner Martin Nature Sanctuary with all of its hiking trails, vernal pools, and of course, being able to walk on over to Uncle Ray's for some after work ice cream. You can't beat that. And for non-M&A sites, I'd go with good old Pictured Rocks Lakeshore because I'm a pure Michigan kind of guy. I got engaged there. I go there all the time. It's beautiful. So take a moment and go ahead and type some in the chat and we'll see what we have.
Yeah, we've got lots of people answering M&A sanctuaries.
Yeah, I like the Lakeville Swamp answer. That was a good one.
We got 2 votes from Julie for 5 Lakes Muskegon. She must really like that one.
Ooh.
Black Creek and the Keweenaw. I think Brandy says Bois Blanc. I think that's the person who said they were from Bois Blanc as well. Dowagiac Woods is a good one. That's a great one for wildflowers. We've got Lakeville Swamp. We've got Jim Rook's Nature Sanctuary.
Estevan Pines.
Estevan Pines, Dowagiac again.
I need to get on up to the Keweenaw. I know that.
Sounds like it. All right, we'll keep going with those guys. We'll let Zach keep going with his presentation. Thank you.
All righty. There it goes. Alrighty, so a little history lesson on Dauner Martin growing up with the Fenton community. Fenton was first established in 1834, platted out in 1837, and incorporated in 1836. And in 1863 is when it was incorporated. And in 1863, Philip Dauner had purchased his land to grow hops for his brewery, which was named the Dauner Brewery and located at the corner of River and Robert Streets on the banks of the Shiawassee River. So the Dauner Martin woodlot has been an active part of the Fenton community as far back as Fenton was a community. And I think that is pretty neat. And adding to that sense of familiarity that comes with living in a small town. The property was passed down through his family and was partially used as farmland, but hadn't really changed too much. When Dauner's great-grandson, Robert Martin, acquired the land, he spent years planting thousands of small pine trees as a reforestation effort at the property. And these efforts are still evident today and can be seen in the form of organized pine rows along the trail system. And I bet you were impressed by the tree in the background of this slide, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. So in 1997, Robert and his sister Marion deeded their land to the Michigan Nature Association to ensure that it would remain healthy and forested. Prior to the donation, the property was rezoned for high density housing. Could you imagine how busy Leroy Street would have been today with an extra subdivision? Instead, we have the 155-acre Dauner Martin Nature Sanctuary that can be seen occupying the green space to the south of this photo. Habitat connectivity is important, especially in fragmented and overly developed areas such as Southeast Michigan. Zooming back and viewing protected areas on a map will reveal how much good we have left in our Fenton community. State parks, county parks, land conservancies, and little native gardens can all add up. So the Friends of Dauner Martin was formed in 2013 and is a small but vibrant community of local volunteers dedicated to the protection of Dauner Martin. The members are called ambassadors and have each committed to various essential sanctuary upkeep duties based on their individual abilities and interests. The ambassadors walk the trails and report issues they observe, communicate sanctuary rules to visitors, and help to answer their questions. They also assist with invasive species removal and other sanctuary tasks. So basically, they are my eyes, ears, and muscles on the ground. In 2017, the Community Foundation of Greater Flint awarded M&A a grant for the purpose of improving visitor accessibility, safety, and boosting the ecological health of Dauner Martin. This grant funded 2 paid internship positions. These interns worked diligently to rally local community volunteers to restore nearly 10 acres of mature oak upland habitat located off the Dauner Road entrance. The interns also created interpretive signage, fixed up parking areas, and created a native garden off the Leroy entrance. So shown here is a bumblebee hanging out on some bee balm at the Leroy Street Garden. Native wildflower gardens are a great communal way to support wildlife, especially all of our little pollinators. And I'm not personally much of a gardener, so if anyone here has a green thumb and lives in the Fenton area, they can absolutely help to maintain this specific garden. I would really appreciate that. So Dauner Martin houses a fair amount of wetlands, ponds, and vernal pools, meaning some of the trails may get a little wet, especially this time of the year. This is an issue that the local scouts attempted to address over the last decade or so, including numerous Eagle Scout projects, building and installing boardwalk systems, as well as a few nice comfy benches scattered about the trail. So while some areas of the trail might still get wet here and there, we have the scouts to thank for a much easier hike nowadays. Go Scouts. Those who enjoy being outdoors, hiking, running, birding, etc., likely have a favorite trail system, but there is something special about having a series of trail systems to pick from. The Fenton area is blessed with a number of publicly accessible parks and natural areas, including Seven Lakes State Park, Deerfield Hills Nature Area, Rose Oaks County Park, and as a cherry on the top, Dauner Martin. Having accessible recreation also allows not only an awesome place to go trail running, but also provides a more solid connectivity between natural areas for our spaces to move around and thrive. So just as you enjoy different accessible areas, so does our wildlife. Altogether, little old 155-acre Dauner Martin boasts a solid 4+ mile trail system, and no mountain biking or equestrian activities here makes for a nice slow hike. So again, having all those different options allows to really bounce around. But you can see on this map, there's just a series of loop trail systems. I myself, even managing this area, have managed to get lost out there once or twice. So protecting and providing habitat for rare species means we are also protecting habitat for all sorts of other more common species as well. Dauner Martin provides an immediate escape from the hustle and bustle of small city life for critters such as turtles, snakes, super cool salamanders, raccoons, opossums, and of course, overly socialized white-tailed deer like the one that you can see hiding in the shrub behind me. This photo was taken just off the Yellowtail Trail, maybe, I don't know, a quarter mile away from my truck. A variety of habitat types allows for a variety of plant and animal life, and a healthy mix of wetland and upland communities can be found throughout this 155-acre sanctuary. Hiking from one small hill to another will reveal ferns, lupin, butterfly weed, marsh marigold, buttonbush, large cranberry, and all sorts of additional shrubs, trees, and lovely spring ephemerals. Shown here is a nice little bloom of lupin. eBird. eBird is a website or app that allows anyone with internet access to contribute their birding observations to a pretty impressive citizen science database. This database can be viewed at ebird.org, and you can refine your search by species, or better yet, general birding hotspots. And guess what? Dauner Martin is listed as an official birding hotspot with an impressive 103 different bird species observed by our everyday sanctuary visitors. The top 3 most common documented species include cedar waxwings coming in at #1, robins at #2, and our little friend here, the black-capped chickadee, at #3. And during my last outing at Dauner Martin, which was just a few days ago, I could hear a barred owl calling out. These guys are usually heard rather than seen, so listen for their distinctive call of "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" during your next hike. I'm pretty good at bird calls, so I bet I tricked some of you into thinking that you had a barred owl in your living room today. And just like eBird, there are tons of other valuable modern day resources to help you better understand the natural world around you. iNaturalist allows you to make observations in the field and will give you suggestions for an identification. Here you can see that protected green space we were talking about earlier at work, with just a boatload of observations being made from within the sanctuary, and unfortunately, a whole lot less coming from the more developed areas within Fenton. So go ahead and download these apps. They're free, and no contribution is too small to make an impact. The tree. Shown here is a relic of Michigan's past, a great ash tree. The tree represented the heart of Dauner Martin woodlot, tall and strong. Unfortunately, even a champion tree is susceptible to the smallest opponent. And in 2007, this tree was defeated by the infamous emerald ash borer just 5 years after its first detection within the state. Early detection, rapid response is the key to stopping invasive spread. So sad. Alrighty, I'm going to say something a bit shocking. Invasive species negatively impacts our natural communities. I spend a lot of my year targeting invasive species and trying to manage these natural areas. Otherwise, within a few years, it will just absolutely take over. Common target species for me include common buckthorn, glossy buckthorn, autumn olive, non-native Phragmites, narrow-leaved cattail, and reed canary grass. I am able to break down my year based on seasonal growth and treatment times for these different species. For example, January through late March, I will treat woody invasives such as glossy buckthorn using a cut and treat method, cutting the plant at the base and using an herbicide at a higher concentration to apply to the fresh cut. An example of that is shown to the right of the screen. When spring arrives, I will change my focus to the early risers, such as the garlic mustard, which outcompetes a lot of our lovely spring ephemerals. Treating woodies during the springtime is much less effective due to the sap flow. You just really can't get the herbicide to absorb properly. So then late spring through early fall, I will target species such as invasive Phragmites, narrow-leaved cattail, and swallowwort. And when winter rolls back around, I will change my focus back to the woody invasives. And if you would like to know more about M&A preferred treatment methods, whether herbicide or mechanical, please feel free to reach out to me after the webinar to discuss more in depth. There are plenty of amazing resources that exist to help educate and eradicate invasive species. And a good first start would be reaching out to your local SISMA office. So maybe you've heard of the term invasive species or have spotted dedicated land stewards out in the woods in action battling garlic mustard during a late spring day. But I can't hammer home hard enough how bad some of these plant species are for our native communities and how quickly they can rob us of our sense of familiarity in some of our favorite outdoor areas. So be like these guys and sign up for a volunteer workday with your local at your local M&A sanctuary. And if you can't find one nearby, go and help out at a local county park, state park, or even your backyard. Any additional support battling invasives will benefit our Michigan ecosystem. Again, reaching out to a group like M&A or your local SISMA will teach you a lot more about invasives. Okay, it's that time we've all been waiting for. It's time to play Name That Invasive. There are a few simple rules to the game. I will load an image of an invasive species on the screen. Attendees will get all excited and type their answer into the chat box. Lauren's going to keep a good eye for the first person to answer each question. And the first person to guess correctly on each slide will win a super cool M&A cinch bag, as well as a copy of our Vernal Pool edition of Michigan Nature Magazine. And if you win one round, you cannot win another round. I'm proud of you for knowing your invasives, but I'm not going to mail you 3 bags. And by the way, there are 3 rounds, so let's go. Okay, first up is an easy one. Coming in at nearly 15 feet tall and forming some of the tightest monocultures and destroying wetland habitat is?
Wow, we had lightning round there. Hang on, I gotta scroll up.
All right.
The winner of this round is Sarah Saunders. I'll forgive the misspelling because you were right on top of it, Sarah. It's Phragmites.
There we go. Non-native Phragmites, and please keep in mind that we do have a native species of Phragmites that we love very much here in Michigan. But most of what you're going to see along the Great Lake shorelines and rivers and really any other ditch water cluster is this non-native Phragmites. Great job. Quick answer. All right, y'all ready for round 2? If my computer is. A little smaller and a bit tougher is number 2, a pokey, angry little plant that has tiny purple flowers, but is more famous for this eerie silhouette.
I'm gonna ask you to name it, Zach, and then we'll pick a winner.
All right, where's my chat?
Because we've got we've got two different answers and I'm not sure the,
Okay.
Idea.
So the answer was Teasel. I see it's in there. I do not know. Nancy, it looks like answered first.
yep, Nancy Nacito, is that, hopefully I'm saying it right, so.
Y'all are
Yeah, Nancy.
quick on the draw tonight, that's for sure. Great job. Okay. And last but not least, we have another tricky one because it's so pretty, right? Wrong. This terribly ugly purple plant is also famous for wreaking havoc on wetland communities. You've seen it highlighting inland lakes, and hopefully a certain species of control beetle has too.
Okay. Goodness, yes, you guys are all so fast. Good job. I think the first one here is Susan Meyer for purple loosestrife.
Good go. So no, we are not talking about this misbehaved swallowtail butterfly who's pollinating the wrong plant, but we're talking about the purple loosestrife. So great job, everyone. The winners can email either myself or Lauren separately with your name and mailing address, and I will get your prize sent out.
I've written those names down too, so we'll be
Okay.
sure we don't have anyone trying to sneak in there.
Alrighty, so you've heard me throw this term out a half dozen times but at this point, but we should probably take a closer look at what a vernal pool actually is. So defining a vernal pool. So they look like this, what's on the screen, but they are characterized by these features. Again, what's on the screen. So I'm going to read the summarized version of the vernal pool definition and then summarize that just a bit more. So vernal pools are naturally occurring small temporarily flooded wetlands found in depressions, primarily in forested settings throughout Michigan. They lack continuously flowing inlets or outlets. In most years, vernal pools are filled with water in the spring and dry up significantly by summer or early fall. Vernal pools typically fill with water in the spring, but also can fill in the fall or winter and generally contain water for a minimum of 2 months in the spring in most years. Because vernal pools dry out every year or on a regular basis, vernal pools lack permanent fish populations. Vernal pools are generally shallow ponds during the wet season that later become exposed basins during dry periods. Vernal pools are important for wildlife because they provide essential habitat for many animals, including amphibian and invertebrate species that depend on them for part or all of their life cycle. So to break it down just a bit more for my own sanity, vernal pools are usually pretty small, found in the woods, occasionally flooded little ponds that have no fish. And we're gonna dig in a little bit more. So if you've ever taken a springtime stroll through the woods, you'd likely experience something similar to this, a seemingly flooded slight depression in the landscape, bellowing with the calls of chorus frogs, wood frogs, and spring peepers so loud that it almost entirely cancels out the surrounding urban hustle and bustle. And if you have a good ear, you can actually listen, let me start that one over. If you have a good ear and know what to listen for, you can actually do a species survey by ear alone, similar to birding. So again, you can hear some construction noise and Fenton in the background, and that's pretty much getting tuned out just by these drums. And again, there are vernal pool complexes, so there are just a series of these scattered all about. The monitoring process for these habitats is best done in the spring as the ice thaws and the wood frogs begin to call out. Following their voices is one of the easiest ways to stumble onto a vernal pool. Both spotted salamanders and blue spotted salamanders can be spotted marching from the more uplandy areas down into their vernal pools where they and the wood frogs will create some fascinating egg masses. A good way to tell they were there even if you don't lay eyes on them. And the last, and in my eyes, most unique indicator species is the fairy shrimp, which is basically just a tiny freshwater crustacean that swims upside down and spends their entire existence within these pools. So when it comes to the great migrations of the animal kingdom, folks often think of the great herds of antelope in Africa, monarchs traveling from backyards down to Mexico, or even the sharp-shinned hawk migration along the Detroit River. But easily overlooked is the quiet migration that occurs each spring for only a few nights under our own feet and in our own backyards. Mole salamanders, both spotted and blue spotted, will travel from their underground tunnels up above ground and through the woods to their vernal pool nurseries, where they will gather in mass, spawning, creating egg masses, and vanishing back into their underground world. This is actually going on right now. And last night's rain in the Fenton area and our current temperature conditions mean that these little critters are most likely out and about doing their business as we speak. This next video was taken within the Donner Martin Sanctuary just the other night, showing a blue spotted salamander trudging its way confidently towards a vernal. No. And they are determined, and they know where they're going. If you've seen the movie Alien, you might be a bit nervous when first observing what's in my hand. While this jelly-like cluster I'm holding appears to be something out of a sci-fi movie, it is simply the egg mass of our friendly wood frog. Mole salamanders will also create similar egg masses within these pools. The lack of fish and different emergent periods of species like bullfrogs allows for a fairly safe nursery for the youngins to grow up. So it's a bit adventurous, but nighttime monitoring for vernal pools is actually really effective, as it seems like every critter you were out looking for during the daytime has come to life. This has been my go-to method to locate undocumented vernal pools over the 2021 and 2022 spring monitoring seasons. And feel free to join me anytime, day or night, for a super fun vernal pool adventure. Hit zoom. Okay, hit enhance. Zoom again. That's how this works, right? Sometimes we have to take a closer look into these seemingly uneventful puddles to have an idea of the life that exists. Shown here is my macro monitoring setup, which cost me about 18 bucks altogether. But I believe that making these little guys bigger and seeing them up close allows us to gain a bit of appreciation for how unique they are. And featured in this brief video are 2 fish fly larvae being just a little bit weird. The underwater microcosm home of the fairy shrimp. The fairy shrimp can be seen charismatically swimming around upside down, but also shown are numerous other dependent species such as mosquito larvae, cyclops, and water daphnia, which is a good indication of water quality. So pay close attention as we dip into this vernal pool. So you'll see the fairy shrimp swimming around right there. There's also the little mosquito larvae kind of twitching around, the daphnia kind of just, I don't know what to say, just kind of bopping around there. Just a little circular guys, all sorts of life just in these little bubbles. You don't have to be a mole salamander or a fairy shrimp to benefit from the presence of vernal pools. During my 2021 vernal pool monitoring season, I had the pleasure of bumping into these 2 Blandings turtles while enjoying my first cup of coffee of the day. And while this specific occurrence hadn't taken place within the Donner Martin Nature Sanctuary, it brings up my next exciting point in that some 550 animal species have been observed in vernal pools in Northeast Forest, ranging from white-tailed deer watering holes to hunting grounds for bats feeding on the numerous insects concentrated around the pool. So you can start to see why I get so excited about these little puddles in the forest. So currently there's a bit of a lack in data as recognition of vernal pools and their impact on the greater landscape is just now starting to take shape. But there are working groups such as the Michigan Vernal Pools Partnership, where you can be a part of the action through active citizen science monitoring projects such as the Michigan Vernal Pool Patrol put on by the Michigan Natural Features Inventory. The mission of the Vernal Pool Patrol is to increase awareness, understanding, and protection of vernal pools through conservation, research and mapping, education and outreach, and collaboration. And your hard work in the field can be seen on a public database. You have to have an ArcGIS to be able to log in, but once you create that, you can view this map. So lots of exciting information can be found on the Michigan Vernal Pool Partnership website, including the technical definition of a vernal pool and some resources to help you better understand how they function in our greater system. So as you can see on this kind of just general widespread map of Michigan, there is just a great widespread distribution. They're not everywhere in the state, but they're in most places. And of course, they're in all of these surrounding states, or most of these surrounding states as well. So I am based in that Heartland Fenton area, and I know for a fact that there is more than one lonely pool in this Flint and Fenton area. So I plan to get busy this season and make some more contributions to the statewide database, and you should too. So due to the sensitive nature of these habitats and the fact that they are really overall pretty small areas, selective management methods should be taken into account to avoid any detrimental effects to the pools. This would include typical natural areas decontamination methods, such as brushing off and bleaching your boots, avoid trampling movement of the sensitive vegetation. Remember, those egg masses are laid on that woody debris within the pool, as well as using good sense with invasive species removal techniques. So avoid spilling gas or herbicide, and only use a wetland approved herbicide appropriate for working near these critters. And of course, you're going to be doing that work in the winter and away from these pools. So use a little bit of sense. And maintaining a corridor between pools and nearby wetland habitat is a great way to boost productivity between the pools and to get those indicator species to spread around and maintain some genetic diversity. So managing habitat that houses vernal pools is managing vernal pools. And by incorporating standard land management practices, we can help ensure the longevity of vernal pools, whether it be a single lonely pool or a large healthy complex. Here is my first go at attempting to map out and specifically manage for the health of vernal pools at our Dauner Nature Sanctuary. This involved scouting for and identifying potential vernal pools, surveying for those indicator species, mapping and identifying corridors, and then some good old-fashioned boots on the ground invasive species removal. I'm going to say something a bit shocking. Invasive species negatively impacts vernal pool habitat, but by simply implementing basic invasive species management practices, we can positively impact the habitat and ensure a more resilient and well-functioning system. Shown is the aftermath of a solid workday removing invasive species and the overly dense understory. The goal of this workday was to establish a healthier corridor between two vernal pools, one of which has all the indicator species present, and the other currently only has wood frogs and a few mole salamanders. Establishing corridors between pools and nearby wetland habitats will, again, spread that genetic diversity around of our obligate species. So mapping and managing your vernal pool is key to establishing a high quality site. This allows you to analyze from an aerial perspective and gives you the ability to think on a larger scale and not so focused on one little puddle. Shown here is the Dauner Nature Sanctuary. And this seemingly urban park houses a number of high quality vernal pools, as well as a strong landscape connection to other wetland communities and necessary upland habitat. And in order to manage these areas, I first mapped out all vernal pools that I could find, and then I drew a map incorporating corridors and buffer zones. And again, this will hopefully help to encourage genetic distribution, basically by making it just easier for these critters to get around. So zoom way back and analyze the distribution of pools statewide, and it becomes how evident these one single pool or a community of pools can have on a greater landscape. So I feel the complexity of certain areas like vernal pools is so rich and moving that it is best experienced in person or a close second through video. So as an end to this presentation, I would like you to sit back and enjoy this 3-minute long video put together by our friends at the Michigan Vernal Pool Partnership. And actually shown here is Yuman Lee adventuring around in one of the vernal pools, and I think she's with us today. Put a little pressure on you.
I usually describe it sort of like a kid in a candy shop. You take your dip net and you scoop a couple times. You first look and it just looks like there's just specks of dirt. And then you look closer and then you realize those specks are moving around and swimming and stuff. And then you start to see all this life in the pool, even with just, 1 or 2 scoops of this little aquarium net. you'll find them, just bursting with all these species, and then a couple weeks later, they're gone. And so I think of them as being these really magical places. Vernal pools have been referred to by some as the coral reefs of northern forests. Just like coral reefs, they're thought of as keystone ecosystems because of the critical role that they play for a number of these different species.
It may just look like a mud puddle. It may just look like this pond that just kind of dries out. But there's a lot more going on in these ponds that you may not see. It's actually really critically important to a whole bunch of creatures.
There are 4 in Michigan that we consider to be vernal pool indicator or obligate species that either only occur in vernal pools or really depend on them for their survival. Those are fairy shrimp, wood frogs, spotted salamanders, and blue spotted salamanders.
There's many examples within biology of things you can't see that are taking place. I mean, there's nothing quite as exciting as like pulling out this trap that's just filled with, all these salamanders kind of writhing around. Because you encounter them so rarely in the greater environment, it's kind of fun to be able to see so many all in one place.
There have been studies done where they have found the abundance of salamanders in forests to be more abundant than even some of the insects. So they're a really important part of the food web and part of the ecosystem.
You have this one chance to see them so concentrated in one area. In a couple of days, they'll be headed back into this environment and go about their lives eating, the little creatures they find underneath the ground and logs. In a year from now, they'll be ready to party and head back on down to the ponds, and we'll get a chance to see them again. I want people to find value in these things that may not look like they have that much value. Without these ponds, these salamanders can't survive. Some of these frogs can't survive. It may not look like much, but they're important. So wherever we can conserve them, wherever we can protect them, and the areas around them, we can also protect these unique species.
So again, I know it's a little bit of a long video, but it's not long enough. I find that very moving, and they put into words what I feel like I cannot. Again, these little puddles in the forest are just full of diversity. I work, again, in a wide variety of habitats, and I preach prairie fen diversity all day, but just taking a closer look into these reveals quite a bit. So thank you for joining me on this virtual tour of the Donner Martin Nature Sanctuary in the greater Fenton community. Please feel free to go ahead and type in any comments, questions you have, and I'll see if I can answer those as best as possible. And I'm going to go ahead and take myself off share screen.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. That was great. Excuse me a minute while I open up my slides here, and then we'll get through questions. A reminder to everyone, we're getting a lot of great questions in the chat box, so I'll do my best to get through those, but it would be super helpful if you can use the Q&A. That'll really help me keep it organized and make sure we get to everyone's questions. So here we go. Next slide. A reminder to everyone, in case you don't want to stick around for Q&A, we started out with name your favorite sanctuary. If you want to explore a Michigan Nature Association nature sanctuary, please try our online sanctuary map at michigannature.org. You can find any and all of our sanctuaries on that map in your neighborhood, or if you're planning a trip to the Keweenaw Peninsula, to the southwest corner of Michigan, they're all on there. So a great place to find a good spring wildflower trillium adventure at Dowagiac Woods. So I have my slides out of order. Sorry about that. All right, so questions we have here. I will get my boxes up here. Let's start with Zach, if you're able to, we have a question about the places that you mentioned around Fenton, the natural areas. There was a request to put those all in the chat box.
Sure, yeah, I can type in some. So again, I live in between Heartland and Fenton, and I'm a trail junkie, so I spend a lot of time bouncing around all of these different areas, but I'm gonna go ahead and list a few for you really quick. So
thank you. Yeah, we'll do that while I find the next question. You talked about some of your, some of the M&A, what are they called? My goodness. Strategies for dealing with invasive species at Donner Martin. Is prescribed burning one of those methods that we use?
we do not do any prescribed burn management at Donner Martin specifically. There are a number of fire dependent communities within Michigan, including upland habitat in certain situations. That being said, we have no real reason to manage specifically for that. It's easier and more effective for us to do a cut and treat more mechanical method and herbicide use for those shrubby invasives, and then kind of manage on a more specific basis. That being said, I have numerous areas within the surrounding area that I am more than happy to implement prescribed burn management practices at, and we do regular prescribed burn management. So
great. Yeah, thanks for that information. We did have a question from Anne about the water in a vernal pool, where it comes from. So can you speak more to that?
I will try to as best as I can. So these areas, they again can kind of, it would be like seasonal, either groundwater impacted or seasonally flooded. So for instance, I have an area in my backyard. I'm fortunate to have a little vernal pool in my backyard. It's super cute. But I've got a nearby wetland habitat. I am slightly lower than that kind of area. And then there's a kind of river that's probably about a quarter mile away from me and probably 20 feet elevation lower. My point is, the seasonal flooding that wetland will see creates a small seasonal stream that lasts for like 3 days and creates that flooding within this pool. I'm sure that that's also impacted by groundwater. Yeah, so I would say the best way to learn about vernal pools is to sign up for the Vernal Pool Partnership training, which actually just occurred, but I'm sure that you'd be able to reach out to them and find a lot of more specific information. So again, jump onto that Vernal Pool Partner website. And yeah, that's going to have a lot more information than I'm going to be able to provide tonight.
All right, good. I would think that information would be fresh in your mind, Zach.
I try, I'm all over.
Yeah, no, that's all right, quite all right. Yeah, so definitely check out mivernalpools.com is that website that Zach's referring to. We'll put that, I did put that in the chat once, but I'll put it in there when we get to the end here. So I don't lose my spot on the questions because there's so many good questions. So there were a couple of questions on the map of vernal pools that you showed. There's a question about the lack of points in the middle of the state, and then also about the different colors of the dots and what that means.
So I'm gonna just try to load that page again really quick so I can have a better idea. So again, there's not gonna be all of Michigan habitat, like the general, mitten shape of Michigan. The habitat isn't all the same. So a huge amount of Michigan is, kind of like wetland habitat. I mean, something like 50%, a huge amount. And areas like the Jackson Interlobate, which sounds technical, but you can think of that basically as like, that Chelsea area, like Waterloo Recreation area shooting up through like Bald Mountain, through like Oakland County, all of those areas where you would have all of those tiny little kettle lakes, a bunch of state parks and through that strip. but there's a huge amount of wetland habitat as well. And then also areas like Berry County, as well, Calhoun, that kind of general portion over towards southwest, western Michigan, as well as some of the forested areas. So other things that are going to impact that, I mean, agriculture, right? You can certainly scrape these things off the face of the earth easily enough. They're not very large. If you forest an area or, like deforest an area and then, turn it into ag, it's going to be gone. And a lot of central Michigan, as much as I love it, I went to central, it's ag heavy. So, and then the different colored dots, again, I think just jumping on the website might be able to, that might just be, clusters of pools and stuff like that, 1 versus 10 versus 50 on a statewide map.
We have a couple of questions about your gear for your setup for viewing the vernal pool creatures. So can you talk more about that microscope setup that you have?
Yeah, so I went on down to my local Staples. I'm sure that you can find them Amazon, anywhere, arts and crafts store. But basically, I just tried to find a magnifying glass that had a really large lens. This one actually has a light on it. The light that you were seeing in that video was unrelated. But I basically try to find the clearest plastic container that I can find. I basically went down to the good old Meijer and picked up some $3 containers. And then had that magnifying glass with the stand, so you could see it kind of just balanced right above it. And then I actually picked up those little cabinet puck lights that you can just stick onto your cabinets or wherever. They cost about $1. And that has a more powerful light than that magnifying glass would have. So I just kind of lean that up against on the side or underneath and get a nice backlight to it. But again, that magnifying glass was probably like $12 or something, and the container is just a couple bucks, and then that light and some batteries and your cell phone. The cell phone's not included in that $18 budget, but
it's a little more than $18, most people. All right. Can you talk about, we have a question about whether or not to wear gloves when picking up salamanders. So can you talk about how to safely handle all of the critters, including the fairy shrimp? How did you get them in and out of the pool for that?
So, salamanders breathe through their skin. So absolutely, if you're going to handle salamanders, if you're going to, I know they're super neat, and if you feel the need to pick them up, using a nitrile glove, I would imagine, would be the best management or best practice method for doing that. I've also read about people just kind of picking up, cluster of leaves with the salamander, and that way it's just in its natural little habitat. These guys are super sensitive. They're just tiny little guys. Try not to handle them as much as possible. They don't move too fast. A frog's gonna move a lot faster than a salamander. They're kind of quick, but they're not that quick. I just shoved my little camera right next to him and was able to get that video easily enough. Then the fairy shrimp. So I went down to a pet store, a little aquarium store or whatever, and I got one of those little dinky aquarium nets for maybe, I don't know, we'll say $1.50. That sounds good. And I try to get one with a nice long handle on it, because you really shouldn't just walk through these pools either as much as possible, because remember, they're basically filled with life, right? Filled with, sensitive little critters. So walking around the pool, you can see on a nice clear day, the water, level isn't very deep in these, but you'll see just, like insects, the little fairy shrimp just kind of bobbing around. So I take my net and I just kind of dip them out. And I have, my big old plastic container that I'm walking around with, and I just lightly place that in there, and then they go swimming off. So I don't flick them or anything like that. I would imagine that they're even more sensitive than the salamanders. So yeah, use as much caution as you can. It's like being a kid, exploring, this, super cool new area again, but yeah, just treat it with respect and sensitivity.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thanks, Zach. We've got, vernal pools, obviously very interesting topic. We got a ton of pretty technical questions. Hopefully you can answer them for us. What happens to the fairy shrimp when the vernal pool dries up?
Oh gosh, so there's this whole
testing your training knowledge here.
Yeah. So there's such a cool life cycle with fairy shrimp, and they depend on seasonal pools. Basically, like they are dependent on these pools drying up, so they need the water to dry up, and they need to basically return back to that soil. So yeah, they just are living in the soil. I mean, you know, it's really amazing. You also have creatures like snails and stuff like that are more abundant in these little pools, and you're not going to really see them, you know, any other time of the year, you know, besides when it's flooded and, you know, full of life again. So they're still there. They're just under the leaves and hiding. They go through a little life cycle. I think that their life is pretty quick and rapid, something like just a few weeks, like maybe 3 weeks or something. I could be wrong on the exact numbers here, but yeah, they just hook up, you know, and they're clear, as you can see. So there's some amazing videos of them out there, and you can see them just kind of filled up with these little red eggs, and they'll just kind of shoot them out. And yeah, it's a really cool life cycle. And I was talking about this the other week, but I had just found out about freshwater jellyfish a few years back. Again, super unrelated. I'm all over the place, but just like fairy shrimp, you know, it's this thing that seems like it shouldn't exist in Michigan. And then when you see it up close, you're like, this a fairy shrimp, a freshwater crustacean. You know, it's not like our everyday species. And yeah, it's a super cool little guy.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things out there. Always learning new things at this job. So we've got a ton of kudos on your presentation, on your videos, Zach. I just want to make sure you get those. And we got a few more questions we'll take, and then we'll wrap up. Just a reminder for anyone who's still hanging on, there's more information about vernal pools on mivernalpools.com. The link to the video, if you want to watch the ephemeral video again, is in there. And also how to participate in the Vernal Pools Partnership and Vernal Pool Patrol. All right, let's get to these last couple questions. If you guys do have any more, just toss them in Q&A real quick, and we'll try to get to them. Otherwise, yeah, please reach out to Zach. He loves talking all things Michigan nature. So his email is zpacana@michigannature.org, is available on our website, michigannature.org. Or he can type into the chat box. That would be super helpful.
You could join me out at Dauner Martin. Yeah, that's an option.
Exactly. All right. So what do you know about how raccoon populations affect salamanders?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Yeah. So how do raccoon populations affect the salamanders?
I mean, I don't really know. I would imagine that they would view them like a tasty little hot dog. That being said, you know, like these things have lived together for a long, long time. I would imagine that habitat fragmentation and degradation has a much larger impact on salamander population sizes than predator impacts. And another thing I'll say is the time that they're, you know, like moving from those upland habitat down into the vernal pools is so brief. So I'm sure that some critters are capitalizing on it. You know, if I were a raccoon, I'd be opportunistic as well. But I can't see it being, you know, as impactful as, say, feral cats.
Okay. Yeah, definitely an interesting thing to look into as we learn more about vernal pools. So, more kudos. How about, could it be said that vernal pools would not be a habitat for waterfowl?
I mean, I kicked up some wood duck out of them the other day. I mean, they were probably just using it as a little stopover point. You know, again, it is a little pocket of water. It's not going to be as ideal for, there's one pool, like one pond, like actual, you know, pond, like fish pond at Donner Martin. And that would be much, you know, more suitable wood duck habitat. But I would imagine very few waterfowl are probably going to capitalize on it, but probably some, like a wood duck, will. But yeah, not your go-to for waterfowl.
Okay. And a not vernal pool related question. Thank you, Roger. How would one find out about M&A volunteer opportunities?
Oh, well, there are lots of opportunities to find out about M&A. So the best one, and I think, well, the best one is stumbling into a Michigan Nature Association sanctuary. Before I actually started working at M&A, I had stumbled into the Donner Martin Nature Sanctuary. That was my first sanctuary that I've ever been to. Again, I'm kind of from this area. So I had a little bit of a sense of what M&A was, and that kind of just leads you down the rabbit hole. But again, there's a lot of land conservancies in Michigan. And when you look at like M&A's statewide distribution map, we're really all over the place. These sanctuaries are anywhere from an acre in size all the way up to thousands of acres up in the UP, and even some really large ones down here. Another really popular thing that we have going on for us, and I think is just really pretty and fun to look at, is the Michigan Nature Association magazine, with all sorts of pretty pictures. And I'm always so fascinated at how wonderful the photos are from our quote unquote amateur photographers that we have, who are, luckily members with us. I do my best to go out and take all these pictures, and y'all just do such a good job. And then, yeah, just social media is always great as well. So, share our videos if you can. And yeah, to whatever groups, we always appreciate that. Lauren would be a better one to answer that. Our communications coordinator over there.
Well, I like to give you the opportunities. Yeah. So michigannature.org is where we share all of our volunteer opportunities when they're open to the public. We're slowly reintroducing them, but there's all kinds of other ways to be involved. Yes, we do have our Michigan Nature magazine, which we love putting together. Features photos from our annual photo contest, from guest submissions. We love seeing natural areas around the state. So if you're a photographer out there and you want some of your photos shared in the magazine, please send them to me, lross@michigannature.org, and I will be happy to consider them as they fit with our stories. If you do want a copy of the magazine and have not received one yet, send an email to michigannature@michigannature.org and we can get one in the mail for you. And that wraps up our presentation for tonight. So thank you everyone for joining us. This has been great. I'm loving seeing all of the positive comments in the chat. And thank you so much, Zach, for leading us through Donner Mountain. It was a very interesting tour. So
yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it.
Yep. We will have more Michigan Nature at Homes in the future, to be determined. Keep an eye on michigannature.org for those announcements. Please follow us on social media. We are one follower shy of 7,000 tonight. So lucky number 7,000. Come on, let's go. Yeah, and thanks everyone. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.